Shut up and sit down.
Hello gang, Colin here, Festa 67's workshop. Welcome to the latest episode of Death Race. Now, you'll notice there's a slight tonal change in the stripes, and when I put these down I forgot to mention that these were put down as almost as a guideline for me. Someone pointed out in the chat on the last episode, it would have been easier to mask them off and line them, but for me personally, I tend to print out a decal, slap it on there, and it just gives me a bit of a guideline to paint against. It works for me, but you know, there are other ways of doing it, and then all I tend to do then is I go over it with the actual finished colour that I want, and I can do it with the hairy stick almost, because I kind of want the decals to look as if they was painted in the prison. So I want brush strokes on them. I want that sort of hand painted look. I'm not going after factory stripes, because don't forget this car was a rotten old Mustang shell that they've grabbed in the prison yard and made to look like an old Shelby GT or whatever, so it's all been painted by hand. So that's kind of what I was going for. I can understand the question in the chat, but you kind of jumped the gun just a tad. But then I didn't put anything up to say that's what I was doing, so yeah. But anyway, moving on. I'm literally just poured a little bit of Vallejo in case you wonder what that is on my desk. It's one of those little clear suction cups that you put, you know, the compasses that you buy for your car and things like that. Anything with a suction cup, if it breaks, I tend to keep the suction cups, and I just use them as a tiny little one-off paint thing. It saves digging out the wet palette and all of that lot, so I just put a couple of drops of paint in there and dab away, and yeah, so that's what that is. And I'm just literally going over the stripe here just to give it a bit of pizzazz, and then I'll start weathering and things like that to perhaps dull it down just a fraction. But as you can see, I've picked out some of the black on the other stripe already, and I shall do the same on this one once the red dries. So I'll probably just quickly whiz straight over the stripes and just get them reddened, so to speak, and then I can come back at it and highlight any of the black that I want to bring out. So it's my way of doing it. It works for me because, you know, I do twitch a bit, and I'm not, you know, sort of as accurate as I once was with paint. So I like putting the decal down and just painting over it, and it just gives me that little bit of almost security. So yeah, there you go. So we'll just slather a bit of that across there and get that blocked in. And like I say, we come back and pick bits of black out that we want more prominent than other bits, because I want to wear the car, so to speak. So yeah, we'll just slap it on.
Slap it on.
Yeah, go on, Ted. Oh, bless him. He must cringe when he sees that. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with it. Still thinking about how far to go with the weathering on it. I'm not sure. I'll have a look at some more pictures and sort of zoom in and just see how it's weathered. But it's going to be probably dust, scratches, perhaps a bit of rust coming through in a few places around the periphery of the car. But bearing in mind, you know, this was Death Race, they probably done a lot of that and moved bits and added plates, so you probably didn't see a lot of that going on, because they would have picked out any heavy rust and just welded metal over it. So it's only going to be surface really, and a bit of pitting and dings and stuff. So yeah, I'll see how it comes along, but I'll have a look at some pictures. There is a website out there that's got the movie car on it, so I'll give that a visit and have a little look-see. But for the moment, it's got its stripes, it's coming along, and I'm beginning to see the car take shape. I'll just put another little coat on the calipers as well of the red, but it's beginning to come together, it's beginning to take shape. The wheels will go on once I've weathered the wheel arches and put some road dirt up under there and detritus, and then I'm gonna put the wheels in the Dremel with a 220 grit sanding pad and skim the tyres so that yeah, they do look a bit bald in places and things like that. And yeah, so that's the stripes sorted. So we are getting there. So I definitely think, I mean, I'm looking at the picture in the bottom there, how almost greyy silver the panels are, and how faded they are. So there's definitely a lot of scope to knock the black right down. So I can imagine the dry brushing side of it is going to be quite intense. So I shall have a play with, I've got some spare panels, so I'll have a play with one and see how I can tone it down before I attack the model. But by all means, if any of you have got any suggestions on a decent dry brushing effect, or a technique that you guys use that might work, then type it in the chat, let me know. So I'll just have a quick clean up and then we'll go on and start weathering the underneath. So I'll just put my brushes away and dig me pigments out and make a brew. We'll come back and we'll make a start. Right, let's get the flat aluminium out, and it's just the Tamiya XF16 flat aluminium paint that I'm going to be using. I've given it a little shake there, but I think I might need to mix up some more. So I have some concentrate silver acrylic just to my left, and this little pot is what I use for me dry brushing. So I mix up a little bit of concentrate in there. But if you haven't got this, just use XF16, it's the same thing. So we'll just squeeze a bit in there. Probably go for a bit more in a minute. We'll see how the first pot or mix looks, and if it's not thick enough I'll squeeze a bit more in. So we'll grab a bit of X20A thinner, slosh a little bit of that in there, right up to just where the neck starts, just in case I need to add a bit more. And then we'll give that a little shaky pops and we'll see how we go. But what I'm going to try and achieve as near as damn it is the similar effect in the picture in the bottom left. So I'm going to go over the entire body with a bit of dry brush silver, and bear in mind all of this will get a coat of matte varnish at the very end once everything is done and dusted. Each layer I do, I tend to put a little bit of gloss over just to protect it in case the next layer goes wrong. But it will then get knocked back with a matte varnish in the hope then that it gives me some semblance of resemblance of the picture in the bottom there. That's what we're going for anyway, a rough facsimile of that. So I'm just going to drop a little more pigment in there because it is a bit runny, and we don't want it runny. We want it pretty much to stick straight away, but with deft brushage. You know, I use a very long handled gnarly old chisel brush, believe it or not, for me dry brushing, because the bristles are all different lengths and there's bits missing, and for me that brush gives me a more randomized scratches and wear and tear. So it is my go-to dry brush. It's looking a bit clagged at the moment, but yeah, it does what I want. So I'll just start with one of the bars on the side there, and I'll just put a little bit of silver on each end, and I'm literally then just flicking over the surface, and I'll go like from right to left, and then I'll flip and then go left to right, and it just gives you these little lines, but they're almost like miniature X's all the way along, and it just gives different wear. and then a bit of stippling on some of the panels with this brush, and it'll just give a texture of bashed up armour almost. And I'm just going to keep going over it and going over it until I start seeing it talk to me. So you might see me going over a panel more than once, you might see me rubbing paint off, or you might see me just going over with fingerprints, because believe it or not, some angles of fingerprints make some quite nice scratches. So yeah, I discovered that by accident, by the way. It's not that I know what I'm doing. Yeah, so we just go over some of these edges and catch the edges of the panels, the rivets that are holding the panels on, and weld lines and all of that. And it's quite interesting when you're doing this, because sometimes what the film or the camera's picking up isn't what you're seeing with the eye. So it can be quite difficult sometimes to translate onto screen. But I'll put some photographs up at the end as well when we do the reveal at the end of the build series. I'll take some photographs in the photo booth of it all assembled, and we'll see whether the photographs do it any justice. So we'll just keep going over this. Now this is the first layer of this effect that I'm doing, and once it's dry, if I decide it needs a bit more, I will. If it needs knocking back, I shall just put a little bit of thinned black on the tissue and mix it up, and I'll go over it with some thinned black and different shades of grey to bring it back up. So there's ways and means of doing it. So we're just going over the angles. I would say it's about 45 degrees to each panel, but you can do it by eye. You're just trying to knock edges, get the edges, and then perhaps one of the faces of a panel, so the scratches hit the edge and come down over the leading edge almost, and that's all I'm trying to do. And obviously a bit round the inside of the doors there, where they've been getting slammed against the bodywork and rattled and had things bashed against the edges. So that's the plan of action. And the whole car's going to get a good old larrapin of this, and I'll sit it on the bench for a few days and I'll be looking at it. I'll probably put it on a pot of paint and just have it stood in the corner of the bench, just so that I can see how the different light at different times of the day is affecting the model, and that will determine whether I go any further with the silvering, or whether I knock it down then with a matte coat. So we'll look. And again, obviously when the wheels go on, it'll add a difference to it. So we'll just flick the bottom edges of these doors and then work our way up. Again with the left to right, right to left, just to randomise how the paint is hitting the metal panel, because wear and tear isn't all at one angle, it's multiple angles where things have hit a surface from different angles. So we try to randomise it, and I do the leading edges first and then I do the centre of the panels last. So that's that door started. So we can do a bit on the front wing now. Again, start with the arches around the wheels and work our way up the panel. Then we can have a bit of more on the front wings there, because it's bound to get hit more often than the rear of the car, because it's travelling forwards most of the time. So stuff's going to be hitting the spoiler or the front wheels and banging up over the wings and rattling along the sides of the car. Wipe that off with my finger, knock that down a bit more. Actually, that's given me an interesting texture, so I might keep some of that. Yeah, I like that. And then we can start figuring out where along this front that the stuff's going to strike. So if we do one corner just under the headlight and start coming along over the stripes there, just to give that a kiss with a bit of paint, and then we can start doing the lower edges then of the air dam where it goes up under the bumper into the engine compartment, and then start stippling this, because this is going to have very heavy wear on it, because it's going to be copying a lot of the rocks, boulders that have been laid down on the track to try to stop the cars. So it's going to take a right old beating, this. So that's going to get the most wear, dents, dinks, bullet holes, everything. So bear that in mind if you're making one of these. See, so I'll just give that a little shake to get a bit more paint on the lid, because I tend to let the paint sit on the lid and then I take from the lid rather than the pot, if that makes sense. So if I get any contamination on my brush, it'll only go on the paint that's on the lid, and if I see it I can wipe it off then. So I'll just give that a going over like so. It's really going in quite nicely in some of the lines left from the sanding process as well, because I went over it with a bit of 220 grit just to give it a bit of a key in a few places, so that when this went in it would give me some deep sort of gouges and that. So we'll get some of this in there, and I've got the headlamp guards to put on yet, so they'll go on. Let's start doing the corners of the bonnet, work our way up over and see what textures we get. So I'll just start flicking it very lightly over some of the panel joins just to catch them, and then start seeing where, because the brush is going to hit on the bonnet where debris would hit, see, so it's always going to hit areas first. So try to bear that in mind. Just keep the brush, let the brush do its thing. Where it hits is where an object would hit, so go with it. The brush will capture the edges that are going to get the most damage, so that's what I tend to go with when I do this. It's almost like the brush talks to you. It's like, leave it to me, mate, I know what I'm doing, just put some paint on me and I'll do the rest. So excuse me, I'll come up over the side of the machine gun rack, get that, a few bits and dinks, and the same with these big old louvers there on the driver's side. Catch them. Now they're going to catch a lot of stuff as well, because everyone's going to want to aim for the driver's window to try and kill the driver, see. So we can have some of that. Get a bit more paint on the old brush. Like so. And then we can come up along the other side of the bonnet there and start flicking up over the edge of the machine guns and down around that front lamp panel there. Look at that. And it's just beginning to kiss the edges of that now, which is what we want. All the way around the windscreen surround. We can start coming up over the roof now and doing some of the roof strengthening beams that are welded across the top of the roof there. And catch them, because you might have had a few rocks go up over the top of the roof where they've hit the front of the car, so we can have a bit of that. A few things that are dinked and scooted across there, so we'll just try and randomise that, and then we'll go over it with our pinky to remove any excess. All the way over. Yeah, that's coming along nicely now. Yeah. All the way along now. I'll spin it round. And start looking at this side, and it just makes it come alive for me. Yeah. So, a bit more down the bottom of the car as usual than the top, because that's where most things will be on the track. Scoot along the door there. And along the door louvers. And try and catch that bottom edge of armour as well, because that's going to take a fair old whack. Like so. So around the side vents. I'll just put a bit more around there. Like so. Come along there. Start stippling that panel as well, just to see how the effect looks. Let's do this rear quarter around the wheel arch and start doing some of these strengthening panels here around the sides of the fuel tank, because the fuel tank on the back of this is under the spoiler. And old Frankenstein's a sly old dog. He knows that the most armour needs to be around the fuel cell so that he can get away. I'll start stippling now, I think, in the side of the door, around the leading edges of that, just to give it a bit of texture. See? And I'm going to do that on most of the car. It's just come at it with a chisel brush and stipple, stipple, stipple. And I do it quite quick. A lot of people are surprised how quick I go round a car like this, or anything with a dry brush, and they're like, cool, you do it really quick. And I find the quicker I go, the more random the pattern ends up. If I sit and think about it, each chip will be in a precise measured place, and it just looks too, I wouldn't say false, but it just looks too thought out. Whereas doing it this quick, you're so haphazard as you're doing it, because you're doing it so fast, it gives me that random effect that I'm after. So it works for me. It might not work for you, but give it a go on a bit of old sprue or a paint mule. We've all got a kit that we use as a paint mule. So let's just capture some of this rear louver there, and around the spoiler there. Get rid of some of the excess coal. Yeah, there you go. Give that a little dab just to get a bit of paint off of that, and then we can come back at it. Just like so. All the way around them edges. And then come over the sides, like so. And down there. And that just gives the back end a bit of character. The spoiler might have a bit more wear on it, because obviously it's going to be getting shot at from cars that will be behind. But we've obviously got the big old tombstone on the back of this. And the big old tombstone's about 5 layers of the thickest iron that you can find, and it's slapped on the back of the car, and it gets dropped during the races, and yeah, it becomes a good weapon. So I'll just give the leading edges of the tank a bit of a go over, and then we'll pop the tombstone on, and we'll start trying to blend the tombstone into the car then, because it's easier at this stage to put on all the bits that are attached to the car and try to weather them in the same quick short burst. That way you're continuing the theme, so to speak. If I weather the tombstone separately, it's going to look a bit different patterns or whatever to the car, so we'll just pop the tombstone on, and that's magnetised, that is. I'll put a couple of 5mm magnets, one in the car and one in the tombstone, and I've painted over them, but you might just be able to see the edges of the magnet there. So we'll quickly give this a going over on the inside, because where it's been dropped during races, it would have clattered along the road surface. So again, it'll have its own little bit of weathering on the inside, where it's come away from the vehicle and perhaps struck metal barriers or other vehicles. So that can have a good old clattering of weathering on the inside there. And then we'll attach that to the back of the car, and it is literally ka-ching with the magnets on this. Bosh, with that. See? And that's firmly in place now. So I can start trying to blend the tombstone in now to the motor. So we'll do the leading edges of the tombstone, like so. I'll carry that on just around the underside there. Apologies that I'm just a little out of the link there. There you go. Come down a bit. Try and do the bottom edge and the sides, just to give it a tiny bit of character, like so. And it's surprising using this technique how quick you can weather something. I did a spacecraft like it. I did one of the Master Chief figures that I built. I've built several of the Master Chiefs now, and I used a bit of this technique on that, and it came in really handy. Whilst I've got the silver out, I'll just give the plate an initial scratch as well. This is protecting the engine and gearbox, so as the car's gone over bits and pieces, the front plate and the plate just behind that protects the gearbox would have had a bashing, so we'll put a bit of wear on that, and all of that will then get a coat of dust on it and other bits and pieces in the next episode, whether up underneath the wheel arches and things like that, and then we can put the wheels on. And then we can start thinking then of start scratch building a dio. So we'll just capture these edges, come along and highlight a few areas that may have had an object hit them. Oh yeah, it rolls well, doesn't it? So whilst I'm doing this, I'll just round up with my usual thanks for your support. Thank you to all my patrons that support me. Thank you to James for requesting this build. I've thoroughly enjoyed this build so far, James, and we've had a good bit of banter with it, you know, because James likes to know progress, and he's been coming into me brunch show. Can I have a sneak peek? And you know, it's nice. He's thoroughly interested. He's thoroughly following the videos. He's got some lovely ideas, and we've got a bit of banter going, you know. He messes with me and I mess with him, and it's nice. And yeah, he's been very, very pleasant person to do this for, because I did stop doing commissions, and it can take up a lot of your time, but that's the first stage of this. So hopefully you're getting an idea of what we want. I'll just pop that to one side, and we'll start wrapping up, ready for the end of the video. So keep an eye out on the channel for the next episode, and I'll catch you then, folks. Bye bye for now.